You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Mark Eckert. Mark is a full-time producer and drummer currently residing in uptown Charlotte, North Carolina. His influences include sounds from Passion Pit, Lord, Broods, Churches, Bleachers, and Tears for Fears, among many others. He grew up under the teachings of his Juilliard-trained mother and inventor/engineer father. After studying production and drumming at Berklee College of Music, he began specializing stylistically in indie pop music, jumping between primarily New York City and his home city of Charlotte. He has worked and or collaborated with touring members of Lady Gaga, Prince, Usher, JoJo, Robin Thicke, Fantasia, Tamia, Anthony Hamilton, and Natasha Bedingfield. He has also worked with Kiowa Gordon of Sundance Films, The Twilight Saga, as well as finalists on NBC's The Voice, Fox's X Factor, and both beginning and accomplished artists in countries across the globe. I first came upon Mark a couple years ago when I heard him on the Six Figure Home Studio podcast, and recently found out that he's my friend's brother-in-law, and we connected on Facebook, and he's been super gracious about coming on the show. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Mark to the podcast. Welcome to Secret Sonics, Mark.
What's up, Ben? Thanks for, you literally read my site word for word. I sound very impressive, and then I'm just, looking at myself in the reflection of my computer, and I'm like, what the hell happened? So I'm kidding.
Life happened, man.
Yeah, dude.
Listen, you got to sell yourself on the website. That's for sure.
I guess, man. I guess that's how it works. Welcome to the music industry. But
absolutely. So tell us a bit about how you got started getting involved in it. Like, how did you get into production?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. The way I got into production is through drumming, man. So I probably bought my first mixing, a Alesis iMultimix sort of thing, way back in probably maybe 2009 or something. I got something like that. And I was doing drum covers on YouTube. That was sort of the trend going on at the time. And then one of my buddies, Daniel Grimmett, who actually owns Dark Label, he is awesome. He's been, basically a brother of mine for the past decade at this point. He reached out on Facebook because he saw I was playing drums, and he worked at a studio called Old House Recording Studios in Charlotte. So he hit me up and he was like, hey, man, I actually need a session drummer and I don't have anybody right now. Is this something you'd be into? And I was like, fuck yeah. And I was 14 or 15 at the time. I don't, whatever math is at 2000. I'm 26 now and it's 2020. So I guess, I was around that. And he hit me up, and so I started session drumming around then.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that kind of got me into the the recording world. And then next thing you know, I was the kid with I don't know if you remember the flip camera. But it was it was before GoPro. Sure. We had the flip camera. It was the first. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I was helping make content for all the recording, just doing whatever the hell I could do, learning the basics of, signal flow and stuff like that. And then, I got super into recording, just by osmosis. So I started getting a bunch more gigs. And then when I was a junior in high school, I was playing with a couple bands. I was drumming a lot. I was producing my own band and shit like that. And then Daniel actually got a gig with Kiowa Gordon, and he do you remember the movie called Twilight?
Yeah.
It's the werewolves and shit. So Kiowa,
I remember it. I didn't see it, to be honest, but I definitely remember them coming
I was
out.
in high school at the time, and at this time, North Carolina was basically the Hollywood of the East Coast. I mean, everything was being filmed out here because we had crazy tax incentives. Our shitty governor at the time kind of sold us out, but whatever. So we don't have those tax incentives anymore. So all the film left. But at the time we were getting a bunch of different films in, and one of them was Twilight, and everything was being filmed around Charlotte, Western North Carolina, stuff in the mountains and stuff like that. So, Daniel, through connections met, a couple people, And Kiowa, he was a werewolf. Like, he was one of the main werewolves in these films. And so, this was, if you were in your mid-teens around this time, I mean, Twilight was basically Harry Potter level of popularity in pop culture. And, I was hanging out, and like, I ended up, Kiowa, who was a werewolf, he wanted to do a record. Like, he was actually in the music scene in Phoenix. That's where he's from. Awesome guy, like, loving him to death. He's great. Yeah, he wanted to do a record, and Daniel was like, okay, like, let's do a single. And so we flew out to Phoenix and booked out Gin Blossom's studio, called Uranus Sound, which interesting. I don't know if they meant it Uranus Sound, but whatever. It's spelled like Uranus. I think the studio has since gone under, but yeah. So
we'll have to do a quick Google after this.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Well, I just remember the studio. I would imagine it went under because like there was free weed in the studio. I didn't smoke or anything like that. I was like 16. I wasn't, I was like, as far as
you're a good boy.
Well, yeah, nice Jewish boy. And like, it wasn't, I never really got into that stuff. I don't know why. I think I've just kind of always been super, this is my goal in music, but that stuff's always around. But
yes.
Anyways, so yeah, I think they went under. Like there was, a free weed bowl in there. And I was like, what the fuck? But yeah, we did a single. And that kind of got me really ingrained. I ended up working at CHP Audio in Charlotte. They did a bunch of voiceovers for a bunch of Pixar films and shit like that. And then went to Berkeley, moved to New York for a little bit. I was playing a bunch, and then moved back down to Charlotte. And then I literally just like kind of built a studio out of my parents' basement, and that's turned into my business. And yeah, now I got like people working on my team, and now it's like a actual business. It's kind of weird, but it's really cool.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Did you have an aha moment when you realized, oh man, I'm going to be doing this for the long haul?
I think my real, everybody, no matter how confident you are, unless you're like a fucking sociopath, you're going to have imposter syndrome occasionally.
Sure.
And
absolutely.
I think a big portion of my imposter syndrome went away when within about 6 months, I toured to Australia and Italy, like all over Europe, producing and drumming. And I think I had my aha moment when I was on the beach in Fiji at like 5 a.m. right off of a flight. And I was there for a while before going to Australia. And I was like, I think I'm doing the damn thing. Like,
wow.
Like I was like, I think this is it. Like, and so, and I was paid to go. I was working, still work with Alala, one of my favorite artists. She's out of Melbourne. And I think that was my aha moment. And I think anybody who's like gone to Berkeley or NYU for music or has had like a cool gig, you're kind of treated a little bit differently when you come back home. And, I was treated differently when I came back from Berkeley. And then I was really treated differently when I got home from Australia. And then I was treated even more differently when I got home from Italy. And then when I started getting,
that's really cool.
Yeah, when I started getting some more credits, I was, that's when like people were starting to kiss my ass. That was kind of weird.
Wow.
I mean, so it's kind of weird. It's like,
yeah, I feel also like I was on a tour in November. Was it October or November? It was October, actually.
Sure,
I went to Russia and Kazakhstan.
Oh, sick.
With Alex Clare. I don't know if you know him.
Dude, that's fucking sick.
Yes, it was crazy. Like, so I played bass for him, and I don't think of it as anything crazy because we're buddies and stuff, but like that definitely upped my cred level, I felt like when I got back.
Yeah, it's like once
like, oh, you were on tour playing bass. Okay, you're legit now.
I feel like once you start doing some international stuff, I think that was kind of like a big changer for people realizing that I was very serious about it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I guess if someone is fronting enough money for you to get on a plane and
if they pay for your flight, you're worth something.
Yeah, I guess so.
So yeah, that was really cool. And I think it was also like, it was really good perspective because at the same time I was playing with a group out of Nashville. There's a girl I went to high school with, she went to like our rival high school in Charlotte. And we were like both the music kids. And she was living all around the US, but she ended up relocating to Nashville. And like, I had MD'd for a couple artists and like ran their shows and, drummed for them and kind of like put the whole band together so we could do like a couple showcases out in Nashville for her. And, I was traveling back and forth every other week or something playing. I was producing some artists and I was getting by and I wasn't having to teach anymore because I taught, private piano and drum lessons out of my parents' house to just like, like pay
supplement.
For yeah, exactly. And I think once I left that was really cool. I was like, okay, I'm getting by. Like that was a really big step for me.
That's amazing. So let's I guess jump forward a little bit to what you're doing now. So you proudly state on your website in a little bit of French, but we could say it on the podcast, that you only care about producing and developing indie pop artists. So what exactly is that genre and what usually goes into producing it? Yeah,
so I mean, I was working with a bunch of artists in a bunch of different genres. And I just like wasn't particularly stoked or like passionate about some of those records. And, there's a couple things, for them and for me. For them, they're hiring a producer that's not passionate about their shit. If I'm doing a country record, I'm just not going to care. If they need a revision done, I'm going to, just complain about it.
Or push it off.
Yeah, exactly. And, at the same time, for me, I just felt like I wasn't able to systemize anything that I was doing. So I was always learning on the job and it was just always such a pain in the ass. So I kind of just like said goodbye to like all of those different types of records. And I was like, what's the music that's like second nature to me? Mm-hmm. And the stuff that's second nature to me is like synth pop sort of shit, which like Passion Pit, Phoenix, Lord, Naked and Famous. Lord's a little bit more minimal, but like, that's synth pop, indie pop stuff. And, that is actually turned out to be a pretty popular genre, in the mid to late 2010s. And it still is like, I mean, that's some of the biggest records are this shit. But yeah, it's basically pop music for people who don't want to admit that they like pop music. They're just too embarrassed. They're like, I want to do top 40, but I don't want to feel like garbage about myself because I didn't grow up on this shit. Like, nobody passionately sang In Sync growing up, so.
Right. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, that's basically all I do. I just work with those kind of artists, make those tunes. And yeah, happy as a clam. It's good.
Is that like, so you have to like really learn about like sound design with synths and stuff to get into that?
Or it's funny, man? Everybody like, it's really funny because I've had this come up so often, like when going through like my productions or something, somebody will ask me about sound design and shit like that. And like, I get it. Like there is a lot of, you do have to kind of learn the basics of shit, waves and stuff like that, whatever, like oscillators, blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm not a great sound designer. I'm really not. I just like have a couple synths and I got like my bag of tricks with those synths. And I know if I press this button, do this thing here and mess with the filter there, I'm going to get this weird sound. And the funny thing is, man, is like everybody will talk about a bunch of shit about sound design. They'll talk about a bunch of different mixing techniques and like arrangement techniques and all this shit. And yeah, you do have to learn the basics for all that. But at the end of the day, like making your own sound is literally just having a bag of tricks. You just have a bag of tricks. And if there's a problem that comes up, you have a couple things in that bag and you're like, oh, I'll pull out this. Let's try that. I think everyone romanticizes finding your sound, especially as a producer. Yeah. But like my favorite producers are like Chris Zane and Joel Little. Those are probably my two favorite producers. Chris Zane did everything for Passion Pit, St. Lucia. Some of his newer records like Strong Asian Mothers and Eves. And then Joe Little has done everything for Lord, more recently Khalid, but back in the day, he did shit for Kids of 88, which is like a synth pop group out of New Zealand that never really broke, and they're one of my favorite groups of all time. Sugar Pills.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah. Sugar Pills by Kids of 88. If you listen to the song, it's called Feed the Birds. And in the bridge, firstly, the arrangement is fucking unreal. Like, what the fuck? I have no idea what the hell's going on. Like for some of the bridge, it's like he'll always add extra bars. Just brilliant. Like you're always into it. You're always being led back. And then the drum sounds like both of those producers just understand how to tastefully mix electronic and acoustic drums. So you don't really know what you're listening to. You don't know if it's real or not. And that's what I love. Like Chris Zane will literally